You were always the mediocre one. My mother said that at my sister's bridal shower, with a smirk already on her face, 9 years after she canceled my full art scholarship and redirected every dollar of my tuition money to my sister, without ever telling me. I found out from my cousin. He laughed like everyone had known for years except me. She had held that secret for 9 years. I had held the proof for 6 weeks. My hands went flat on the gift table. My mother tilted her head and waited. I didn't argue. I walked to the TV in the corner, plugged in my phone, and let 60 guests watch. 3 seconds. My sister's fiancé set down his champagne glass, stood up, and walked out of the room. He never came back. Take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story speaks to you. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now let me take you back 9 years, to the day my mother sat across from my scholarship advisor and told her I had changed my mind. April 14th, 2015. I was 18, 3 weeks from high school graduation when the letter arrived. Cream envelope, university seal, the kind of paper that feels expensive between your fingers. Full scholarship. Maryland Institute College of Art. 4 years, tuition, housing, materials, stipend. Everything I'd worked for since I was 12, since I'd first held a charcoal pencil and understood that lines could become feeling. I ran downstairs with it still sealed. My mother was at the kitchen table with her ledger. She kept a ledger, every family dollar tracked in her neat, slanted handwriting. My father was at the sink, rinsing coffee grounds from his mug, his back to the room the way it always was when things mattered. Mom, I couldn't get my breath. Micah, full ride. She set down her pen. She took the envelope. She read it twice, front and back, the way she read contracts. Then she folded it closed and handed it back. That's wonderful, Margaret. Her voice was warm, the temperature she used for company. We'll celebrate tonight. Your father will pick up something nice. I believed her. That was my first mistake. 3 days later, I came home from my shift at the frame shop to find her at the same table, same ledger, different expression. Pursed lips. The face she made when numbers didn't cooperate. Sit down, Margaret. I sat. The chair scraped too loud. I spoke with your advisor at Micah. She opened the ledger to a fresh page. Mrs. Patterson, lovely woman, very understanding. My stomach dropped before my brain caught up. Understanding about what? You changed your mind. She wrote something in her ledger, a date, an amount. You realized art school wasn't practical. You wanted to stay local, save money, maybe transfer later. Mrs. Patterson processed the withdrawal this morning. Your scholarship is released. I didn't. I stood up. The chair fell backward. I never said that. I never talked to her. Margaret. My mother's voice dropped to the register she used for disappointment, the register that made me feel 8 years old, spilling juice on her good tablecloth. Don't make this dramatic. You signed the withdrawal form. It's done. I didn't sign anything. She looked up from her ledger. Her eyes were the same gray-green as mine, the same shape, the same everything. Looking at her was like looking in a mirror that hated me back. Check your backpack, she said. The copy's in the front pocket. You left it on the counter yesterday. I saw your signature. I found it. Cream paper, university letterhead, my name typed in the header. Below it, a signature that looked like mine. Margaret E. Vance. The E for Elaine, my grandmother's name. The loop on the M was wrong. Too round. I'd spent years perfecting my signature, making the M sharp, architectural, a line that held weight. This M sagged. This isn't my signature. My mother closed her ledger. It's done, Margaret. The scholarship money is reallocated. Your sister needs tuition support for Northwestern, pre-med. You know how competitive that is. I looked at my father. He was still at the sink, still rinsing, though the mug had been clean for 5 minutes. Dad. He didn't turn. Your mother's handled the finances since before you were born, Margaret. She knows what's best. What's best? I heard it then, the shape of my family, my mother as architect, My father as foundation, silent and load-bearing. My sister Claire as the finished house, polished and photographed. And me as the scaffolding, useful until you're not, invisible by design. That night, I walked to the 7-Eleven at the corner of Maple and 4th. I bought a coffee I couldn't afford and sat on the curb until my legs went numb. The scholarship letter was in my back pocket. I read it 17 times, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. I went home at 2 a.m. My mother had left a note on my pillow. Local community college application is on the desk. Due Friday. I've already written the check for the deposit. I didn't sleep. I filled out the application by dawn, my hand shaking so badly I had to redo the emergency contact form twice. I took 3 jobs that summer. Frame shop mornings, diner evenings, overnight stock at the craft store weekends. I started community college in August with $340 in my checking account and a portfolio I couldn't look at without wanting to tear it apart. My mother was right about one thing. I was mediocre now. Exhaustion does that to your lines. Your colors go muddy. Your hands forget confidence. Claire started Northwestern in September. My parents drove her. My mother sent me photos from the road. Claire's new dorm room. Claire's meal plan card. Claire's smile, uncomplicated, funded, free. I worked Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, New Year's Day. I paid my own rent on a studio apartment the size of a parking space. I bought my own brushes, my own canvas, my own mistakes. And every holiday, when I came home with paint under my fingernails and circles under my eyes, my mother found a way to mention Claire's grades. Claire's research position. Claire's future, bright and cert, built on the money that should have been mine. You always were the practical one, she'd say, patting my shoulder. Not everyone has the talent for the big leagues, Margaret. It's good you figured that out early. I believed her. That was my second mistake. I believed her for 9 years. The years after the scholarship bled together. Community college, then a state university I paid for myself, loans compounding like interest on a debt I never agreed to take. I graduated with a BFA in 2019, 4 years late and $34,000 in debt, while Claire walked across her stage debt-free, her MD acceptance already in hand. I moved to a city 2 hours away. Not far enough. My mother called every Sunday at 6 p.m., her voice carrying the same ledger precision, tracking my failures like weather patterns. Still at that frame shop. Gallery assistant now, Mom, part-time. Part-time. She'd repeat it the way she said practical, a word that meant less than. Claire's in her 2nd year of medical school. Did I tell you, top of her class? You told me. She's dating someone wonderful. His family owns hospitals. Real estate, too. Old money, but not stuffy about it. I learned to make sounds while she talked. Oh, that's nice. I learned to cook single portions, to buy canvas only when it went on clearance, to fall asleep with my brushes still in my hand because stopping felt like admitting she was right. My father sent checks sometimes. $50, folded in blank envelopes, no note. I'd find them in my mailbox like secrets he was too afraid to deliver in person. I cashed them. I needed them. And I hated that I needed them, that his silence had a price and I kept paying it by accepting. Claire visited once. August 2021. She stood in my apartment doorway with her sunglasses pushed into her hair, looking at my walls the way you look at a patient's chart, assessing, diagnostic. Mom says you're still doing the art thing. I'm a gallery assistant and I paint, yes. She walked to my easel in the corner. I had a still life half finished. Pears on a blue plate. The blue was wrong. I'd been fighting it for 3 days. Nice, she said, in the tone she used for adequate lab results. Not promising, not concerning, just nice. She stayed 20 minutes. She talked about her rotations, her fiancé. There was a fiancé by then, a man named Richard she'd met at a charity gala. His family owned 3 hospitals and a vineyard in Napa. She talked about the wedding she was already planning, the venue she'd put a deposit on, the dress she'd tried on in Milan. "I want you to do the invitations," she said at the door. "Mom says you have time since you're not exactly career track." I should have said no. I knew even then that I should have said no. But she was smiling, and it was the first time in years she'd asked me for anything, and some part of me, the 8-year-old who'd worshipped her big sister, who'd believed we were on the same team, said yes. That yes cost me 4 months. The invitations were letterpress, hand-painted watercolor borders, custom calligraphy I taught myself from YouTube videos because the gallery couldn't spare me for a class. I worked on them at night, after my shifts, my hands cramping around brushes finer than anything I'd used in school. Claire sent revisions by text. "The blue is too bright. The font is too modern. Can you make it look more expensive without looking like we're trying?" I made 17 versions. She chose the first one. At the engagement party, I watched her introduce Richard to our mother's book club. "My sister did the invitations," she said, and the women cooed appropriately, and then Claire added, "She's got such a good eye for color. It's sweet that she found a way to use it." Sweet. The word landed like a pat on the head. I was 30 yards away, refilling the punch bowl, and I still heard it. Richard found me later by the dessert table. Tall, fair, the kind of man who looked like he'd been born in a blazer. He picked up an invitation from the display and turned it over in his hands. "These are beautiful," he said. "Did you study design? Fine art, originally?" "Originally. I went to community college, state school after." I said it flat, expecting him to follow up with the usual questions. Why not art school? Why the delay? Why the debt? People always asked. My mother had trained me to answer. I realized I needed something practical, but Richard just nodded. "Self-made," he said. "I respect that. My grandfather started with a hardware store, built everything from there." I didn't know what to do with respect. It sat in my chest like a foreign object, heavy and warm and terrifying. "My sister's lucky," I said, because it was expected. Richard looked across the room at Claire, who was laughing at something our mother had said. "I'm the lucky one," he said, but his voice had gone distant, already calculating something I couldn't see. He was kind. That was the worst part. In the months that followed, at dinner parties and family gatherings, Richard would find me in kitchens and on patios. He asked about my work at the gallery. He remembered the names of artists I mentioned. Once, at Christmas, he found me sketching in a corner, just hands, study after study of hands, and he sat down without asking and watched for 20 minutes. "You should be showing," he said finally, "not assisting. My mother thinks, I didn't ask about your mother." I put my sketchbook away. I was afraid of what I might say if I kept talking, afraid of the warmth his attention created, how it made me want things I had trained myself not to want. Claire noticed. Of course she noticed. At the New Year's party, she found me in the hallway outside the bathroom and gripped my arm hard enough to leave marks. "Richard thinks you're interesting," she said. "Don't mistake that for anything else. You're his project, his charity case. He collects people who didn't make it." "I know what I am to this family, Claire." "Then act like it." She let go, smoothed her dress. "The bridal shower's in March. Mom wants you to do the florals and the welcome signs. Free, obviously. You can consider it your gift." "Obviously," I said. She walked away, and I stood in that hallway with my arm still stinging, thinking about the word gift. How it could mean something given or something taken, depending on who was doing the giving. I said yes to the shower. I said yes to the signs, the florals, the late nights and the aching hands and the certainty that none of it would be enough. I said yes because I was still, after everything, trying to earn a place at a table where I'd never been invited to sit. That was my third mistake. I kept saying yes until there was nothing left to give. Until my cousin laughed in a bar on a Thursday night and told me what everyone else had known for 9 years. The bridal shower was scheduled for March 15th. 6 weeks away. I was drowning in it, the florals, the signs, my actual job at the gallery, the second job I'd taken to cover Claire's gift expenses because my mother made clear that cheap materials would reflect poorly on the family. I worked in my apartment until 2 a.m., then 3 a.m., then until the sun came up and I had to shower and start again. My hands developed a tremor. I told myself it was caffeine. It wasn't caffeine. Claire sent Pinterest boards, something like this but better. More organic but polished. You understand. I understood. I understood that organic meant expensive looking without the expense, that polished meant my labor invisible, my name nowhere, my contribution absorbed into her narrative like water into sand. The engagement dinners were worse. Richard's family, old money but not stuffy, turned out to mean his mother, Alina, who had built 3 charitable foundations from nothing and could spot insecurity across a dinner table like a bloodhound scents fear. "Margaret," she said at the second dinner, reaching past her son to touch my wrist. "Claire tells me you assisted with the invitations. They're extraordinary." "She designed them," Richard said, "painted the borders herself." Claire's smile tightened. "Margaret helped. I had the vision, obviously." "The aesthetic. Obviously," Alina said, and her eyes moved from Claire to me, cataloging something. I looked down at my plate. Afterward, in the restaurant bathroom, I overheard my mother talking to Alina's sister in the adjacent stall. "Margaret's always been sensitive about Claire's success. She had a scholarship once, you know, art school, decided it wasn't practical." A laugh, shared between women who'd never had to decide anything for themselves. Some people need to learn their limitations early. I stood in that bathroom stall until they left. I stared at my hands, paint-stained, shaking, still capable of making something beautiful despite everything, and I felt the old familiar collapse. The belief that I had done this to myself, that the scholarship had been mine to lose, that my mother's ledger had simply recorded facts, that mediocre was a diagnosis rather than a sentence she'd written herself. I went back to the table. I smiled. I helped Claire describe her vision for the wedding arch to Alina, who listened with the polite attention of a woman who had already seen through everything. That was February. The Thursday night that changed everything came 2 weeks later. My cousin David worked in IT for the university now. He'd started in admissions, processing financial aid forms, before he transferred to systems administration. I ran into him at a bar near campus, my old campus, the one I'd never attended. I was buying spray adhesive for the welcome signs at the craft store across the street and stopped for a beer I couldn't afford because my hands were shaking too badly to drive. "Margaret." He slid onto the stool beside me. "Haven't seen you since when? Aunt Carol's funeral." Something like that. He ordered a whiskey. He was 29, balding early, the kind of man who told stories about college like they were peak experience. "Crazy seeing you here." "I always think about that scholarship you turned down. Full ride to Micah, right?" I set my beer down. "I didn't turn it down." "Sure you did. I processed the withdrawal myself. Spring 2015. He laughed, remembering. "Your mom came in with the form, said you'd changed your mind, wanted to stay local. Shame, though, you were really talented. I saw your portfolio in the system." My mother brought the form. "Yeah, nice lady, very organized." He sipped his whiskey. "Anyway, worked out for Claire, right? She really needed that tuition money, pre-med's expensive." I heard the words. I watched his mouth move. But the meaning arrived delayed, like sound traveling slower than light, so that I saw his expression, casual, friendly, utterly unaware, before I understood what he'd said. "What tuition money?" "Your family's fund. Your mom explained it to Mrs. Patterson. Since you were going local, the scholarship released the reserved housing and materials stipend. Your family redirected the equivalent to Claire's account. Standard procedure when a student declines." He shrugged. "I mean, you know this, you signed the form." "I didn't sign anything." David finally looked at me, really looked. Something in my face, my hands gripping the bar, white-knuckled, or my voice, flat and strange, made him set his glass down. "Margaret, the form had your signature. It had my mother's handwriting." Silence. The bar noise continued around us. Clinking glasses, sports on television, someone laughing too loud 3 tables away. David's mouth opened, closed. He was not a bad person. He was simply a person who had processed paperwork without questioning, who had accepted my mother's explanation because my mother was good at being accepted. "I need to go," I said. I drove home. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my apartment building until my breath stopped hitching. Then I opened my laptop and searched. Maryland Institute College of Art Financial Aid Records request. It took 6 phone calls, 3 transfers, a supervisor who finally believed me or believed enough to send the PDF. The cancellation form arrived in my email at 11:47 p.m. I knew her handwriting. I'd seen it my entire life, in notes on my lunchbox, in the margins of my report cards, in that ledger she still kept. The M was wrong. The loop too round, too soft, too hers. I stared at it until my vision blurred. 9 years. She'd held this secret for 9 years, and I'd held the shame she'd sold me, wearing it like my own skin. Then I opened a new tab, bank records. The family account my father had set up when we were children, the one he'd mentioned once in passing, for your education, both of you. I'd never seen statements. Never been added as a beneficiary. But I knew the bank. I knew the date of the scholarship cancellation. I requested my own records first. Proof of my deposits, my withdrawals, my nothing. Then, on a legal advice forum I found at 2 a.m., I learned about subpoenas and discovery and the rights of wronged parties. I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. Something had replaced exhaustion, some cold, clean fuel I didn't recognize. 6 weeks. I had 6 weeks until the bridal shower. I started making calls. The gallery gave me a warning. My 3rd in 2 months. I was falling asleep during shifts, snapping at clients, once crying in the storage room over a cracked frame that wasn't even valuable. My manager, Priya, pulled me into her office with the door closed. "Margaret, what's happening?" I couldn't tell her. I couldn't tell anyone. The PDF sat on my phone like a bomb, the bank records I'd requested still processing, my mother's handwriting waiting to detonate everything I thought I knew about my own failure. "Family stuff," I said. "The wedding." Priya nodded like she understood. She was 34, unmarried, successful in ways my mother would never value. "Boundaries," she said. "You need some. This job is real, Margaret. Your art is real. That wedding is a performance." I wanted to believe her. I went back to my station and finished mounting a series of lithographs by an artist who died unknown, whose work sold now for prices that would have changed her life. The gallery had a plaque, discovered posthumously. I stared at it for 10 minutes. The engagement dinners continued. Claire's vision expanding, my labor invisible, my name absent from every conversation about the invitations, the save the dates, the custom watercolor place cards I'd painted until my fingertips cracked and bled. At the 3rd dinner, Richard's brother asked about my work. "Claire says you're an artist." "Gallery assistant," I said. "She said you design the invitations." Claire's laugh cut across the table. "Margaret helped. I had the concept, obviously." The palette, the mood, she executed. Executed, the word hung there. I felt Aliner's eyes on me again, that assessing weight. "Execution is skill," Richard said quietly. "Concept is cheap." The table went silent. Claire's smile didn't falter, but something tightened around her eyes. She reached for her wine, and I saw her hand shake just once, barely, the only crack I'd ever witnessed in her composure. After dinner, in the coat check line, Richard found me again. "I'm sorry," he said. That was inappropriate. It was true. It was cruel. He handed me my coat, held it while I put my arms through. "My family has a foundation for emerging artists, Self-taught, non-traditional paths I think you should apply. I don't have a portfolio, not a real one, not in years. Then make one. He wrote an email address on his business card. Deadlines in May, after the wedding. I took the card. I didn't believe he meant it. But I kept it, tucked in my wallet behind my debit card, where I'd see it every time I paid for Claire's floral supplies. The belittling became ambient like humidity. My mother mentioned my apartment's square footage at brunch. My father asked about my career trajectory in a tone that suggested he already knew the answer. Claire introduced me to Richard's colleagues as my sister, the creative one, which meant unemployed, unserious, unthreatening. I let it happen. I needed it to happen. Every insult was data, every dismissal proof of the system I'd been trapped inside. I was building a case I didn't yet know I'd file. The bank records arrived on a Tuesday. I opened them in my car, engine running, heater blasting against March cold. The Family Education Fund, $127,000 at its peak. My father's contributions, tracked monthly, automatic transfers from his salary. The withdrawal, April 17, 2015. 3 days after my scholarship was canceled. The full amount transferred to an account labeled C. Vance, Northwestern. I sat there until my phone died, until the car went cold, until I could feel my toes again and my hands stopped shaking enough to screenshot everything. I had the forged signature, the bank transfer. An email from my mother, dated April 16, 2015, that I'd found in an old account I'd forgotten. Claire's tuition is secured. Margaret decided to stay local, so we're reallocating. She understands. She's always been practical. She understands. I'd been 18, devastated, working 3 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night. I'd understood nothing except that I wasn't good enough, that my mother's ledger had recorded my inadequacy, that my own hands had failed me. I made the slideshow that night. 5 slides. The cancellation form, the bank record, the email. A photo of my community college ID, dated September 2015, 4 months after I should have been at Micah. A final slide, my signature, the real one, scanned from my driver's license, the sharp architectural M that proved everything else was forgery. I saved it to my phone. I told no one. The bridal shower was in 10 days. Claire sent a final Pinterest board, something like this for the welcome sign, but bigger, more impactful. I painted her sign at 3 a.m., my hands steady for the first time in years. The lettering was perfect. The florals I arranged were lush, expensive-looking, organic but polished. My mother would be pleased. She would look at my work and see confirmation: Margaret, practical, useful, mediocre. She wouldn't see what was coming. I tested the TV connection at the venue the day before. A 70-inch screen in the corner, usually used for photo slideshows. I brought my adapter, my cable, my phone. I played a video of my cat, deleted it, checked the lag. 3 seconds from phone to screen. 3 seconds for everything to change. The venue coordinator asked if I needed help. Just checking the tech, I said. For the bride's surprise video, she smiled. How sweet. I didn't correct her. Priya found me in the storage room the morning before the shower. I was organizing ribbon by color, a task that didn't need doing, my hands moving without my permission. You're not coming in tomorrow, she said. Not a question. I need the hours. You need to not collapse in front of 60 people. She sat on a crate of shipping materials, knees to chest, the way she did when she was preparing to say something uncomfortable. I looked at your time cards. You've worked 19 days straight, 72 hours last week. Claire's shower is tomorrow. I know, she paused. I also know you requested your university records, financial aid archives. That's not normal wedding stress, Margaret. I kept sorting ribbon. Blue, indigo, navy, black, the colors of drowning. Something happened, Priya said. 9 years ago, you're verifying it now, which means you're planning something. She waited. I didn't answer. I've managed artists for 12 years. I know the look, the calm before the burn. I set down the ribbon. What if I told you that everything I believed about my failure was manufactured? That my mother wrote the narrative I lived inside, and I never thought to check the sources? I'd say that's horrifying, and I'd ask what you need. I told her. Not everything. The slideshow stayed locked in my phone, the date circled, the countdown private. But I told her about the scholarship, the forged signature, the tuition fund redirected while I worked 3 jobs and learned to believe I wasn't worth investment. Priya listened without interrupting. When I finished, she stood and walked to the window, her back to me, the afternoon light catching the gray in her hair she'd stopped dyeing last year. My mother was a pianist, she said finally. Conservatory trained. She gave it up when she married, said it was her choice. I found her audition tapes when I cleaned out her house. She'd been accepted to Juilliard. My father made her decline. She told everyone she wasn't good enough, and I grew up believing that story, respecting her for her practicality. She turned. I never confronted him. He's dead now. She's 91 and doesn't remember her own name, let alone the life she didn't live. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, be cert. She crossed the room, stopped in front of me. Whatever you're planning tomorrow, be cert, because you can't uncross this line, and you shouldn't want to. I was cert. I had been certain since David's laugh in that bar, since the PDF arrived, since I saw my mother's handwriting on a document that had defined my entire adult life. But Priya's warning sat heavy, not doubt, weight, the gravity of what I was about to do. I went home. I slept 4 hours, woke at 2 a.m., checked my phone. The slideshow was there. Slide 1, the forged cancellation. Slide 2, the bank transfer. Slide 3, her email. Slide 4, my community college ID. Slide 5, my real signature, the proof of the lie. I added a 6th slide that night. A photo of my hands taken that evening, paint-stained, steady, holding a brush. Caption, these hands built everything she said I couldn't. The shower was at 11. I arrived at 9 to set up the florals, the welcome sign, the gift table arrangement my mother had approved via text. Simple, Margaret, not too artistic. This is Claire's day. The venue was a converted greenhouse, glass walls, February light streaming through, 60 white chairs arranged in a semicircle. The TV was in the corner where I'd tested it. I connected my phone during the sound check, left the cable coiled behind the gift table, the adapter in my pocket. Claire arrived at 10:30 with our mother. They were matching in some way I couldn't define, same posture, same smile, same certainty that the world would arrange itself around their needs. Richard was with them, holding Claire's elbow, his expression distant in a way I'd come to recognize. He was performing too. I wondered if he knew it. Margaret, my mother's voice carried across the greenhouse. The florals look acceptable. But the welcome sign, she tilted her head, the gesture I'd learned to fear, is that the best you could do? I looked at the sign, perfect lettering, perfect spacing, 40 hours of work dismissed in a sentence. It's exactly what you requested, I said. Don't be defensive, darling, I'm only trying to help you improve. She moved to the head table, arranging herself beside Claire, and I felt it again, that old collapse, the automatic shrink. But this time I noticed it. This time I tracked its source. The guests arrived, Eleanor and Richard's family occupying the front rows like territory. My father's colleagues, my mother's book club, cousins I hadn't seen in years. David was there, my cousin, the one who'd laughed. He caught my eye across the room and waved, friendly, oblivious. I waved back. 60 people, the number my mother had specified. Intimate but impressive. She'd sent the invitations herself, tracked the RSVPs, managed the ledger of social obligation. I checked my phone. 10:47 a.m., 13 minutes until the scheduled start. The TV was ready. My adapter was ready. I was ready. My mother found me by the gift table. She moved through crowds like water, parting without resistance, arriving exactly where she intended. You've done adequate work, she said, considering. Considering what? She smiled. The smirk I'd seen my entire life, the expression that said she knew something I didn't. Considering you were always the mediocre one. She tilted her head, waited. I didn't argue. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone and adapter, and walked to the TV in the corner. 3 seconds of lag, that's all it took. The screen lit up. My mother's handwriting, magnified to 70 inches. The cancellation form, her forgery, the 2-round M that had sentenced me to 9 years of believing I wasn't enough. The room went silent in stages. First the front rows, Aliner's family, the ones who could read the document from their seats. Then a ripple backward, confusion turning to comprehension, the way sound travels through water. What is this? My mother's voice, still controlled, still performing confusion. Margaret, what are you doing? I pressed advance. Slide 2, the bank transfer, $127,000. April 17, 2015, see Vance, Northwestern. That's the Family Education Fund, I said. My voice carried, I didn't recognize it. Dad's contributions, automatic transfers. The money that should have covered my housing, my materials, my future. Slide 3, her email. Margaret decided to stay local, so we're reallocating. She understands. She's always been practical. I didn't understand, I said. I didn't decide anything. You forged my signature and told everyone I failed. The room breathed. 60 people inhaling together. I saw Aliner stand, slowly, her hand finding Richard's shoulder. I saw David's face, my cousin, the comprehension arriving delayed, the way it had for me. My mother moved, fast for a woman who never rushed. She was at the TV in 4 steps, reaching for the power cord, and I stepped between her and the screen. There's more. Slide 4, my community college ID. Dated September 2015. 4 months after I should have been at Micah. Slide 5, my real signature, the architectural M, the proof. 9 years, I said. You let me believe I wasn't good enough. You used my shame to fund Claire's perfect life. Every holiday, every comparison, every time you called me practical, my voice caught, steadied, you were covering this. My father stood, finally. From his seat in the 3rd row, where he'd been invisible as always, load-bearing and silent, he didn't speak. He just stood, his face gray, looking at the screen like he was seeing his own signature there. Gerald, my mother's voice sharpened. Sit down. He didn't sit. Claire made a sound, not words, something animal, denial without language. She was gripping Richard's arm, but he wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the screen, at the bank transfer, at the email with its casual theft. This is slander, my mother said. This is, Margaret has always been dramatic, jealous, you know how she is. I know how you are, Aliner said. Her voice cut through the room like the glass walls didn't exist. I know exactly how you are, Patricia. I've known since the engagement dinner when you dismissed your daughter's work in front of my entire family. She moved to the aisle, straight-backed, deliberate. Richard, we're leaving. Richard didn't move. Claire's grip on his arm tightened, whitening her knuckles. Richard, she said, babe, this is crazy. She's crazy. You know how she is. He looked at her. Really looked. I saw him see it, the performance, the absorption, the way she'd introduced me as help rather than artist, the way she'd claimed my work as her vision. I asked you, he said quietly. Directly, did Margaret design the invitations? She assisted. You said you designed them. The room held its breath. 60 people frozen in their white chairs watching a man choose what kind of family he wanted to join. Richard reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out his phone, set it on the gift table beside my mother's carefully arranged presents. Then he removed his watch, his wallet, the keys Claire had given him to her apartment. Richard. Claire's voice climbed. What are you doing? He walked to the door. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. He just walked, and the door closed behind him with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. He never came back. The chaos that followed had texture. Claire screaming, my mother grabbing my arm hard enough to bruise, my father finally speaking, "Patricia, is this true?" And my mother's answer, not denial but deflection. The girls were always competitive, you know how Margaret exaggerates. I unplugged my phone. The screen went dark, but the images stayed in the room, projected onto 60 retinas, 60 memories that would outlast any denial. Eleanor paused at the door. She looked back at me once and nodded. Not approval, recognition. The acknowledgement of a woman who had also built herself from materials others had discarded. I walked out. My mother shouting my name, Claire sobbing into her hands, my father still standing in the third row with his ledger finally visible for what it was, a record of complicity, of funds transferred and silence purchased. I didn't look back. I had spent 9 years looking back, measuring myself against a standard my mother had fabricated to hide her theft. I was done measuring. In my car, I blocked every number. My mother, my father, Claire, the cousins who would call to mediate, the aunts who would send prayers and guilt in equal measure. I blocked them all before I put the car in drive. The road opened ahead of me. February light, thin and clean, the kind that promises nothing but doesn't lie. I drove to Priya's apartment. She opened the door in sweatpants, coffee in hand, unsurprised. Done. Done. She stepped aside. I walked in. I sat on her couch and finally, cried, not from pain, but from the release of holding it, all of it for 9 years. "What's next?" she asked. I thought of Richard's card in my wallet. The foundation deadline in May. The portfolio I didn't have, the work I'd abandoned, the hands that were still capable despite everything. "Next," I said, "I make something." The first week I slept. 14 hours some days, waking only to eat the soup Priya left in her refrigerator, the bread she bought knowing I wouldn't shop. My body was paying back a debt I hadn't acknowledged, 9 years of 4-hour nights, of caffeine and adrenaline, and the constant low-grade panic of not being enough. Priya didn't push. She cleared a corner of her guest room, set up her old easel, left supplies she must have bought specifically. Charcoal, watercolor, canvas boards. I didn't touch them. I looked at them, cataloged their presence, let them wait. On day 8, I called the foundation. The number on Richard's card, the one I'd kept through everything. A woman answered, professional, warm. "Richard Vance Foundation for Emerging Artists." "This is Margaret Vance. Richard gave me this number. The deadline, May 15th. We've moved it to June 1st this year, actually. Richard requested the extension." A pause. "He mentioned you specifically, said your path was non-traditional." I held the phone with both hands. "I don't have a portfolio, not a real one, not in years." "Then make one," the same words he'd used. "We fund potential, Ms. Vance, not credentials. Richard was clear about your situation." I didn't ask what he'd said. I didn't want to know how he'd described me, wronged sister, forged signature, stolen future. I wanted to be seen for what I made, not what was taken. "I'll submit," I said. I started that afternoon. Not with intention, with anger. I painted my mother's ledger, the pages I'd seen my entire life, her neat slanted handwriting tracking everyone else's value. I painted it burning. I painted it underwater. I painted it as a cage, the bars made of numbers, and myself inside with hands pressed against the columns. The work was raw, embarrassing, necessary. I threw away 6 canvases before I kept one. Then another. By week 3, I had 12 pieces, none of them good enough, all of them true. Priya looked at them without speaking. She circled the room twice, paused at the burning ledger, the underwater columns. "These are about her," she said finally. "Everything I am is about her, that's the problem. Then paint something else." I tried. I painted my apartment, the one I'd left behind, the size of a parking space. I painted the gallery, Priya's office, the storage room where she'd found me sorting ribbon. I painted my hands, study after study, the way I'd done at Christmas, the way Richard had watched. They were competent, they were empty. I could feel the absence in them, the space where feeling should be. "You're still performing," Priya said. "Still trying to be good enough. For who?" I didn't answer. I went back to my mother's ledger, but different this time. I painted the page where my name should have appeared, the scholarship entry, the housing stipend, the materials allowance. I painted it blank. I painted the absence as presence, the negative space as form. That was the first piece I kept. The second was my sister's face, but not as she was, as she might have been if she'd had to build herself, if she'd worked 3 jobs and slept 4 hours and learned to believe her own hands were inadequate. The Claire who didn't exist, the one my mother had protected from ever becoming. The third was my father, his back at the sink, his hands passing $50 bills in blank envelopes. His face in the third row, finally standing, finally seeing, finally too late. I painted until my fingers cracked and bled, until Priya made me wear gloves, until I understood that the work wasn't about them anymore. It was about the architecture of survival. How you build a self from materials others discard. How you learn to occupy space they tried to keep empty. The submission deadline approached. I selected 15 pieces, photographed them in Priya's living room with northern light, wrote the artist's statement she'd insisted I draft. My work documents the construction of self under erasure. The subjects are absent presences, scholarships declined without consent, signatures forged, futures redirected. I am interested in what remains when the official record lies, what the body remembers, what the hand makes anyway. I read it to Priya. She nodded once. "Send it." I did. Then I waited. The response came in 3 weeks, not from the foundation administrator, from Richard himself. A brief email, formal, careful. "The committee was unanimous. Your work will be featured in our September exhibition. We offer a $15,000 stipend and studio space for 6 months. Please confirm your availability." I confirmed. I didn't ask about Claire. I didn't ask about my mother, or the wedding that wasn't happening, or the ledger that had finally been opened to other eyes. I confirmed, and I started packing, and I let Priya drive me to the studio they'd assigned me, a converted warehouse downtown, windows facing east, light that arrived clean and without history. The first morning I sat on the concrete floor and didn't paint. I just breathed. The space was mine. No one's name on the lease but mine. No one's expectations but mine. No one's ledger tracking whether I was practical, productive, promising. I thought of my mother then, not with anger, with geometry. She was a point in space, fixed, calculating distances. I had been orbiting her gravity, defining my path by her pull. Now I was in open space, velocity unknown, trajectory unmapped. It was terrifying. It was freedom. I picked up a brush. I started painting, not the ledger, not the absence, not the them of everything. I started painting the light, the way it entered the window, the way it changed hour by hour, honest and unrepeatable. My phone stayed blocked. My family stayed distant, a constellation I no longer navigated by. I painted, and the work changed, and I changed with it, and September arrived with my name on a gallery wall for the first time since I was 18, since I believed my hands could make something that mattered. The exhibition opened on a Thursday. I wore black, simple, nothing that would distract from the work. Priya came. Elena came without announcement, standing before my pieces longer than anyone else, her head tilted in that assessing way I'd learned to recognize. "Richard was right," she said, finding me by the wine table. "You should have been showing years ago. I wasn't ready. You were prevented." She set down her glass. "There's a difference. I'm sorry my family was part of that. Your son wasn't." "No," a pause. "He wasn't. He's in Napa now, the vineyard. He sends his regards." I nodded. I didn't know what to say to regards, to the ghost of a man who'd walked out of a room and never returned, who'd extended a deadline and requested an exhibition and remained careful, formal, distant. I didn't need to know. I had the work. I had the light. I had the studio and the stipend and the future I'd finally stopped measuring against my mother's columns. The exhibition ran 6 weeks. 3 pieces sold. The gallery wanted more, a solo show, a catalog. I said yes to everything, learning to occupy space without apology, to name my price without flinching, to sign my name, the real one, the sharp architectural M at the bottom of canvases that were finally only mine. The solo show opened in March, 1 year after the bridal shower. The gallery was larger, white walls, track lighting my name on the marquee, Margit Vance, constructed absence. I walked through the space the night before, alone, checking sight lines, the way the light hit each piece. They'd sold out the preview. 15 collectors, names I didn't recognize, prices I wouldn't have dared ask 6 months ago. My dealer, a woman named Solange who'd found me through the foundation, had handled everything. I just painted. That was our arrangement. "You have a visitor," she said, appearing at my elbow. I tried to explain you're not receiving guests, but she's persistent. I knew before I turned. My mother's voice carries, even in whispers. She was by the entrance, gray coat I didn't recognize, hair different, shorter, styled, the way she looked when she was performing Recovery. "Margit." I didn't move. "How did you find this address? Your father's cousin, David." She stepped closer, hands visible, empty, the posture of someone who'd been coached. "I've been trying to reach you for months. I blocked you." "I know." She stopped 10 feet away. Close enough to speak, far enough to show she understood boundaries, or had been taught them. "Claire's wedding is in June, to someone else. Richard's cousin, actually. The family thought it would be," she paused, appropriate, "to heal the connection." I laughed. The sound surprised me, sharp and genuine. "You came to invite me to Claire's wedding." "I came to apologize." The word landed wrong. Too smooth, too practiced, the product of sessions I could imagine, therapist offices, worksheets, the language of accountability learned by rote. "For what?" "For the scholarship. For not believing in you." Force she reached into her coat, pulled out an envelope for this. I didn't take it. "What is it?" "A check, the amount you would have received, housing, materials, 4 years, with interest." She held it out. "I want to make this right." I looked at the envelope. Cream-colored, heavy stock, the kind she used for important correspondence. The kind she'd used for Claire's wedding invitations before I'd made them, before I'd unmade everything. "You want to make this right," I repeated. "Yes." "With money." "With," she faltered, the first real crack I'd seen, "with what I have, what I can offer." I took the envelope. I didn't open it. I held it in both hands, feeling its weight, the years compressed into paper and ink. "Do you know what I painted last month?" I asked. "After the foundation exhibition. After the sales, the interviews, the profile in the journal." She shook her head. "I painted you, not your face, your ledger, the actual one from your desk. I bought it at the estate sale after Dad moved out." "Did you know he moved out?" Her jaw tightened. "I knew. I painted every page, every entry, Claire's tuition, her apartment, her car. The entries for me blank mostly, or marked practical, local, handled. I painted the moment I understood that handled meant erased, that your ledger was a record of what you chose to see." "Margit, I burned it, the painting. I filmed it, actually. It's part of my new series, Combustion Archives. The destruction of documents that defined lives without consent." I held up the envelope. "This would be the next piece if I accepted it." She understood. I saw her understand, the way she always had, the quick calculation, the assessment of leverage, the adjustment of approach. "What do you want?" "Nothing you have." I set the envelope on the nearest pedestal, beside a sculpture of cast hands, fingers interlaced, holding nothing. "The money won't buy back the years. The apology won't rewrite the narrative you sold everyone, including me. The only thing I needed from you was the truth, and I took that myself." She flinched. The first unguarded reaction, the crack in the performance. "Your father wants to see you. Then he should come himself." He's afraid, I nodded. He always was. I walked past her toward the back room where my unsold pieces waited crating. She didn't follow. I heard her heels on the concrete floor, the pause, the door opening and closing. When I returned, the envelope was gone. So was she. Solange found me standing before the empty pedestal, the cast hands still holding nothing. Everything all right. She offered me money, the scholarship amount, with interest. Solange's expression didn't change. She'd been in this business long enough to know families, to know the transactions they attempted, the debts they tried to settle with currency that didn't convert. Are you taking it? I left it there. She took it back. Good. Solange checked her phone. The Times critic arrives in 20 minutes. You should eat something. I had sandwiches sent to the back. I didn't eat. I sat in the back room with the crated paintings and thought about my father's fear, my mother's ledger, the envelope that had sat on the pedestal like an offering refused. I thought about Richard in Napa, sending regards through his mother. I thought about the work ahead, the combustion archives, the new series about documents and their destruction, the life I was building from materials I'd finally learned to claim. The critic's review ran Sunday. Vance's work operates in the space between record and memory, between the official narrative and the body's truth. Her hands, painted, cast, photographed, become witnesses to histories that paper tried to erase. I read it twice. I saved it to my phone, not for validation, but for documentation. Evidence of what existed now, what I'd made, what couldn't be forged or redirected or entered into anyone's ledger but my own. My father called the following week. Different number, unknown area code. I answered before I could stop myself, habit of the old self, the one who still waited. Margit. His voice, thinner than I remembered, older. Your mother told me she saw you, the gallery. She told you about the check. She told me you didn't take it. Pause, breath, the sound of him gathering courage he'd never had. I wanted to say I've started therapy, finally, at 63. The therapist asked about you, about the scholarship. I told her I didn't know, that I trusted your mother, that another pause, that I failed you by not looking, by not asking. I held the phone with both hands. The old anger was there, familiar but smaller now, contained in a larger space. You gave me $50, I said. In envelopes, secretly. Why? I knew it was wrong, what she did. I didn't know what exactly, but I knew. The way you came home that day, the letter in your hand, and then nothing. Community college, 3 jobs, I knew that wasn't choice. His voice cracked. $50 was all I could do without her noticing, without having to explain, without having to be the one who what? Who chose, between you, between anyone and her. I never chose, I just paid. I thought of his ledger, the one I'd found in the estate sale, the automatic transfers, the careful tracking of funds that moved without his direction. He'd been a function in her system. Input, output, silence. Why are you calling now? Because she offered you money. Because I saw, finally, that money was never the point. The point was the choosing, the seeing. And I never, he stopped, gathered himself, I never saw you, Margit. I looked at you my whole life and saw what she told me to see. Practical. Mediocre, handled. I want to learn to see differently, if you'll let me. I didn't answer. I didn't know how to answer. The request was too large, the timeline too short, the damage too carefully catalogued in years of work. I'll think about it, I said. That's more than I deserve. It might be more than you get. I'm still thinking. I hung up. I sat in my studio, the warehouse space with eastern light, and I painted until my hands ached. Not the ledger, not the absence. My father's hands passing the envelope. The moment of contact, the transfer, the secret kept from the ledger keeper. I painted it not to forgive, to witness, to make visible what had been hidden, what I was still learning to see. The studio became my address. I slept there sometimes, on a cot Priya found at a garage sale, waking to light before dawn, painting until the windows went dark. I learned to cook on a hot plate, to shower at the gym 3 blocks away, to let the work consume what my family had left of me. My mother sent letters. Real letters, handwritten, the slanted script I'd learned to recognize as forgery. I didn't read them. I stacked them in a drawer, a collection I might burn someday for combustion archives. Evidence of attempted reconciliation, offered too late in the wrong currency. Claire married in June. I saw the photos online, a cousin's post, public, unavoidable. She looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I had grown. The venue was smaller too, the guest list thinner, the groom's face unfamiliar. Richard's cousin healing the connection, the narrative continuing without me. I didn't feel absence, I felt completion. The story had ended where it needed to, in a greenhouse with 60 witnesses, a screen displaying truth, a man walking out who never came back. Alina visited my studio in August. She came without announcement, the way she did, her assessment immediate and complete, the light, the work on the walls, the cot in the corner, my life compressed into evidence. "You're successful," she said, "by any measure. By my measure. Richard asks about you." I set down my brush. "You said that last time." "He asks differently now." She moved to the window, the eastern light catching her silver hair. "He's selling the vineyard, moving back east. He wants to start something, foundation work, but smaller. Direct, artist residencies, no boards, no committees. Why are you telling me?" "Because he won't," she turned. "Because I watched my son walk out of a room once, choosing principle over comfort, and I've wondered ever since if he regretted it. If he wished he'd stayed, managed the compromise, built something with less integrity but more companionship. And I think he doesn't regret it. I think he wishes he'd known sooner what he was capable of choosing." She paused at the door. "I think you taught him that, whether you meant to or not." She left. I painted until midnight, her words unresolved, the work absorbing everything I couldn't say. September brought the combustion archives opening. I burned the ledger painting live, filmed, documented, the ash collected in jars labeled with dates and coordinates. The crowd was larger than my first show, the prices higher, my name in conversations I didn't need to hear. My father came. I saw him in the back, alone, wearing a jacket I recognized from years ago, the same careful posture. He didn't approach. He watched the burning, the ash, the moment of destruction I'd made visible. Then he left, a nod in my direction, nothing more. It was enough. It was more than enough. I am 32 now. The studio is still mine, though I've added a bedroom, a real kitchen, windows on 2 sides. My work is in collections I don't track, museums I haven't visited, catalogs I don't keep. I paint what I need to paint. I sign my name, the sharp architectural M, and let the work leave me. My mother stopped writing last year. The drawer of letters remains unopened. My father sends postcards sometimes from places he's traveled, the first trips of his life without her direction. I don't reply, but I keep them. Evidence of choosing, however late. Last month, I found a letter in my mailbox with no return address. Inside, a single sheet, handwriting I didn't recognize at first. I never knew. David told me after what he'd said, what he didn't understand. I would have stopped her. I would have tried. "I'm sorry I didn't see you either. Claire, I read it twice. I burned it not for the archive, just for myself." The ash went into the garden I planted on the studio's roof, tomatoes and herbs and flowers that don't need to be practical, just alive. This morning I started a new canvas. Not the ledger, not the absence, not the them of everything. Just light. The way it enters the window. The way it changes, hour by hour, honest and unrepeatable, mine to witness and record and finally, trust.